It brings me back to a discussion that I had a lot with the original Hunger Games book, where people would be like, "Yeah, it's a cool book." People would never do that. No one would, stand by and let their kid go into the arena. And I just would sit there and be like, I feel like, am I crazy? Because I know human history, and I know we did put people in arenas, and people did stand by, and I think that the idea of implicit submission is present within the concept of the Hunger Games. If you have made a submissive society that feels that it has to give up its young, periodically as tribute to a larger nation, that society is already submitted in many ways. I mean, and we see it differently with the career districts where they're trying to integrate to some degree with the capital ideals. They assume those values on their own. At least in District 12, we see that it's different in the sense that most people reject the capital, even though they're underneath the thumb. But it is very interesting because I guess just talking about this brings up the question of like, well, what does it say about our society that we can't imagine that this could be a possibility, that people would do this or feel compelled to do this in the right circumstances? It's interesting
But
to
we do.
contemplate, Go ahead,
We
good.
no, we do this.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't want to make anyone really angry, but I mean, we send our children off to war, and we let them enroll. And, they're not getting drafted, and we go to and there's wars that you don't agree with necessarily, and it's all about money most of the time. It's not like World War. It's not like we're not going to go save a group of people. We're not trying to like bring liberation anywhere. Most of our most current wars haven't been about that, and so we do it. We've been told that it's like patriotic, which is what they say about the games. They're patriotic. They're keeping the peace. And that's not too far off from sending your
Oh,
children to war.
Jessica, you're like you're blowing my mind a little bit because that is the draft. I mean,
Yeah,
like
it's the
that's why
draft.
people sit here and say this couldn't happen, and it's like, well, why don't we remember the '60s when
It's like, no.
people were
I,
pulling names and they were sending these kids, and what was the point? Was it any more? Did it have a
Well,
bigger point than the Hunger Games?
we did, and I mean, we as sort of the nation and governing body did recently burn a book called The History of the Third Reich, which contains the very famous quote, translated in English, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Not to run too far down the rabbit hole in the American public education system, but perhaps I think this illustrates why these books are important, not only because they're well written, they're cool stories, they'll engage your love of reading and storytelling, but they can also teach you a lot, and they can probably push a lot of people's point of views to ask these questions in the first place. Because Brian, I think you nailed it when you were like, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's cool, but it's fiction. And you're like, barely, in the way that like Octavia Butler is ostensibly filed under fiction, but if
Right.
you
Mm-hmm.
live in
Yeah.
Los Angeles in particular, you're like, I think she's a witch. And I mean that as a huge compliment.